Hi there, and welcome to another episode of The InEVitable. This is the show where we talk about the future of the automobile, the future of mobility, where we're going, how we're going to get there. We talk about stuff like EVs, autonomous driving, or maybe performance hybrids, extreme performance hybrids like this car. This is the Aston Martin Valkyrie, and we have the guy who designed it, Miles Nurnberger, coming in, and he's going to talk to us, and I could do hours on this car.
You can. It's kind of nauseating how much you talk about this car. I very little about it. You took all the greatest trips, apparently you've driven like 18 times. In my mind, this is going to be a controversial podcast because I think we might be talking to the guy who has designed perhaps maybe the best internal combustion-based hypercar. This might be the end of the car as we know it, the supercars we know, because everything is going EV, right? That's why it's inevitable. But we'll ask him and see what he thinks.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this car makes, 1,100 horsepower as a full hybrid. It's 1,000 horsepower from the V12, 100 some odd more from the EV motor. I did just drive an EV that makes 1,900 horsepower.
That's what I'm saying.
And
But I think,
was pretty good.
I think in terms of the development of a vehicle, we may never see a vehicle that is developed quite this way ever again. And in my mind, does that mean it's the peak, the end?
Peak automobile or peak internal combustion?
Peak internal combustion, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, I can say you'll never see a car designed like the Valkyrie again. But let's find out why. Ladies and gentlemen, Miles, I always mispronounce his last name because it's very German, even though he's very British, Nurnberger. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm really excited you're here. I'm excited you're here for a lot of reasons, but the overriding reason I'm here is because Valkyrie, the Aston Martin Valkyrie, I've been describing it as it's the Manhattan Project of automobiles. And
Well, can we talk about why I'm excited that he's here?
Yeah, for a second, but let's go back to Valkyrie.
Okay, so I'm excited because we actually have somebody here he's exactly my age. He's our age.
Okay.
Born in 1976.
Yeah.
He's younger than me. Jeez.
Yes. So he's younger, more successful than you. That's what I like. We had another car designer.
Yeah.
But possibly for the first time. No, Ralph didn't go to Art Center.
Yeah.
But we have a non-art center car designer. It's just like I didn't know they exist.
Back in my day, there was only about 3 places to do car design. So there was Art Center.
Yep.
I think Art Center Switzerland had closed at that point already. And then there was Coventry University and Royal College of Art in London. They were pretty well the only 3, because I think even Strat in Paris was not really.
And you went to
Coventry.
Right. Okay.
Beautiful Coventry.
So we should announce his name. I think did you already announce his name?
Miles Nurnberger.
Nurnberger. Design director at a little company you might have heard of, Aston Martin.
Yeah.
And
we'll get to his resume. I want to just Valkyrie. Let's just talk Valkyrie for a second. Because my question is, I'm sitting here in front of this book, A Wild Ride: The Making of Valkyrie. I also just finished reading The Making of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes, and
I started it thanks to your recommendation.
Thank you. Not that dissimilar, just in terms of like Newey, Adrian Newey. I would say he's like a theorist, excuse me. And then it was left up to the experimentalists to work out, like actually putting into production all these crazy ideas. And it was sort of like the Manhattan Project, where you had people that like Leo Szilard, who theorized that if you start shooting neutrons into the center of a uranium molecule, it'll fission in a certain way and release energy. But like getting from that realization to an actual working bomb, and getting from the famous, famously,
probably.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you talk, I promise. But like famously, Valkyrie is conceived over 4 plates of bangers and mash. And you tell the story about the birth of the car.
Yeah, so it was really Simon Sproul, Andy Palmer, Christian Horner, and Adrian Newey in a pub in not far from Red Bull in Milton Keynes, and obviously Andy had recently joined the company, and had sort of believed that a mid-engine car could be the way to go to elevate the whole brand. And so him and Simon had known Christian through
Infinity Red Bull, yeah.
And so they got together in this pub over bangers and mash to discuss it, and basically realized they had this shared passion to do a mid-engine car.
And there was also, according to this book, there was also some real want by Red Bull to keep Adrian happy and keep him at their F1 team, because Ferrari was like, "Hey, Adrian, come design a road car."
Yeah.
And so here was a OEM that said, actually, you can, and Ferrari would never give him the laissez-faire, the hands-off that you guys did, I guess, ultimately. But he had. The idea initially was Adrian would have total control, right? That was
it. It was. I mean, that's Adrian. That's Adrian. That's why he's so successful. I think when you engage with Adrian at first, if you don't understand that, it doesn't really work. It is total control,
right?
And over every single detail, and that's why he's won as many world championships, or his cars have won as many world championships as they have. And you quickly discover that level of detail he goes to.
Right. Could you give some examples? Because I know there's a bazillion, and I was, when I drove the Valkyrie, I was with you in Bahrain, and I was very interested in driving the car, but then after talking to you and the rest of the team, I was actually much more interested in just the story behind the car. Then it was really fast, but like it's insane. Like okay, so give us some Newey examples of.
Well, I think the one that always strikes me. I don't know if he ever knows this, so if he listens, he'll discover it. But when we were camped out basically in Red Bull's offices for, I don't know, 3 years at least. The design department was, and in the first few months, it was very good spirit. It was a real adventure. I think one of the things to say about the car is, when you talk about the Oppenheimer thing, most car companies pretty well, when they start a car, if you look at all the big OEMs, they know how to deliver exactly what the marketing team have asked for.
Right.
And this really was like the bomb, in the fact that we had something described, but actually most of the people on the project thought, I actually don't know tomorrow how to deliver what we've told the world
we're
going to deliver.
Right.
So that was an amazing thing. So we start getting work. It's really exciting. We're doing something impossible. And we'd get into meetings with Adrian, and I'd notice him with my team start to basically go red in the face and become really uptight, difficult, questioning. And when I say questioning, I'm being polite at this point. And slowly I realized what it was. It's like in the car world, when we're talking about moving a line on a design, we go, I'll move it about 10 millimeters. And so we use the same language. And he thought we were sloppy.
Right.
And I'd watched it, and I just took the team and just said, right, everything you describe, do it to 2 decimal places. So they did it. So instead of saying 10, they'd say 9.81, and the problem disappeared. He suddenly realized we cared and we were accurate, and that's what he was after.
Huh.
So, I mean, that's just a really simple example of Adrian.
Let me just pause. So, because for people who feel like they got thrown in the deep end here.
Yeah, we are in the deep end.
You're in the deep end. Adrian Newey, okay, famous motorsports race car designer. He's designed for Williams, for McLaren.
But without question, the most successful aerodynamicist of all time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
he can see air.
He has a great book, which I've read. It's How to Design a Car. You should read it. It is actually, there are very few truly I'm gonna get savage for this. There are very few really must read car books out there. Right. This is one of them. It's a quick read. It's a memoir. It tells his life story about designing all these famous race cars. It's fantastic. There's another name you threw in there, Simon Sproul.
Yep.
Longtime PR guy, has been all over the place. Spent a long time.
Nissan, Aston, Tesla.
Ford. Did a stint at Tesla.
Did a stint at Stellantis.
Yes.
Yeah. He's at Red Bull now.
Yes. So he's got his fingers and toes in many pies. But then, really, I think there's some people out there who are like, "What, Valkyrie? What? This Viking? What are we talking about?"
Yeah.
Can you just describe what this vehicle is, like to a layperson, like a true it looks like a spaceship.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was supposed to be, can you get a Formula One car on the road? That's really it. So for a long time we called it, because of the Aston thing, it was called a Formula One car in a Savile Row suit. And that was the thing. And actually the project was called originally Nebula, which was Nebula being Newey, Bull, and the A being Aston.
Oh.
So for the first 2 years of its life, it was always known as Project Nebula. I'm not sure if that's in the book or not.
It is. And I remember Andy, I was at Andy Palmer. I was at Goodwood with him, and we were sitting in the Lagonda Giraffe, and he goes, "Hey, if you have any friends that buy at the time it was less money. It was like £1 million or so. It was. I know that you guys should have sold it for more than he sold it for, but it was less than that."
Yeah.
And he goes, and I go, "Yeah, I have friends that buy cars that cost that much." He goes, "Listen to this," and he kind of described it to me, and I'm like, "Get out of here."
But the early days, it was like it started as 7 cars, then we went to 24 cars, then we went to 100 cars. It was moving, and if you go back to the time, actually, I think when we launched, I think it was 2 million the car. In the end,
Yeah,
Dollars or pounds?
pounds, if I remember correctly.
But the dollars moved up, so it depends when you bought it.
But at that
Yeah.
point, 2 million was a lot for a car.
Crazy.
If you look at the sort of 18, 24 months following it, suddenly everything was 3, 4, 5 million.
Yeah,
Suddenly Valkyrie was cheap,
Yeah.
relatively.
I mean, so in the same moment, and we should again describe the underpinnings of the car, but in the same rough time period, AMG 1 came out.
Yeah, but
What else escalated this whole everybody building a hypercar?
Chiron, for instance, I think the intro price was like 2.5 million or something, but then the Devo was like 6 million a car. They made 40, sold out before anyone saw it. Super Sport went up to $4 million dollars, and all 65, 60, whatever sold out, and all these one-offs were 5, 6.
Koenigsegg, Pagani.
Yeah, Pagani did the Barchettas 15 million a pop for 3 of them. And they sold within a moment of him announcing them.
How much 177s were?
1.2 million.
1.2 million.
And we're tricky to sell them all, right?
Yeah.
At the time.
And that's it. As a company, we were like, we did it. We literally launched it 177 in 2009, just as there was a financial crisis.
Great timing.
Yeah.
So
Good timing.
never the best time to launch a very expensive car. But I think the company was aware of that, so it was quite cautious when it went out with 2 million. I mean, the car technically is so complex. If you ever have a chance and come to Gaydon and see them being built, they're like satellites. They're not. It's not a car production. It's
So describe what is the Valkyrie?
so. What is a Valkyrie? So it pushes the absolute limit of all road car regulation. It is a naturally aspirated V12 engine producing 1,000 horsepower, which at the time was absolutely the highest specific output of a NA engine.
Revs to 11,000.
Revs to 11,000, which again very
right, 11,002 or something.
Yeah, 11.2 or 11.3, I can't remember. It's hard mounted to a carbon fiber chassis. All the engine is double wishbone, push rod, torsion, all integrated down into the chassis, completely integrated. And significantly, it's the amount of downforce. It actually, so I think, what do we say? It produces about, in general driving, about 1,200 kilos, so 2,500 pounds of downforce.
At what speed?
It will basically, if you hit the brakes at 120 miles an hour, so in a normal situation,
On the way to the grocery store.
if you're going down the straight in Bahrain,
Right.
Yeah.
and you're doing,
I've done that.
and you're doing 180 over 120 miles an hour, you're producing about 650 kilos of downforce. The minute you hit the brakes over 120, it basically doubles. All the active aero comes alive, and it doubles the amount of downforce. So under braking, it goes, so from 1,200 pounds to 2,500 pounds of downforce. Its actual peak downforce is
3 tons.
it's completely limited by the tires. It can produce even higher peak
Right.
loads.
It pops all the tires, right? That's the problem.
So there's a valve basically. I get told off by our PR team, but I'm going to do it anyway. It was nicknamed the toilet seat, but I got in trouble because all the designers and engineers on the project called it the toilet seat, and so I assumed
I'm sorry, what does it look like?
And I assumed that was its name. And one day I said to Adrian, the toilet seat thing, and he just looked at me blankly, and all the team was standing behind me. No. Anyway,
Should mention that your Red Bull Aston Martin partnership fell apart a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Anyway, the toilet seat, this valve basically, and it is about the size of a toilet, so it opens and basically bleeds off the downforce.
Where's this valve?
It's in the diffuser under the car.
So is this active aero?
Yeah.
Are these like, so you hit the brakes and all of a sudden these wings just like flop forward like a 747 on landing or something?
No, you've got the front wing. So the front wing looks pretty well like a Formula One car, but it's sort of tucked under the
Clamshell.
nose. Yeah. And then you've got an active wing on the back, and then you've got these active flaps.
Like DRS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you brushed over a lot, like
Drag reduction system. Sorry, F1.
Like, yes, the engine is hard mounted to the
structural.
tub, but like it's really hard mounted. It's not like an F50 where it's like partially stressed.
Oh, yeah.
It's like if you were to take the 4 bolts off of the engine, it would fall out of the car because there's nothing. It's literally whatever the engine's made out of touching the carbon fiber. There's no dampeners. There's nothing, and there's nothing else.
So when you rev to 11, when you rev to 11,000, I mean, you feel everything in your back. It's quite immense, and that 11,000 just shakes you like.
And the tub acts as like a speaker, like the floor like amplifies the.
It doesn't sound very pleasant, though. Is it pleasant?
No, I mean,
Do you know, I was lucky enough. I went to the Silverstone Grand Prix, and one of our customers lent me his car, so I drove it down tiny English country roads all the way to Silverstone, and I liken getting into the car as the same anxiety as trying to get a group of children out of the house. and at first it's like overwhelming, just and I know the project, and it's like you get in it. And I took my son, who's 14, in it, and so we both had to get in, get our harnesses on. You've got to go through a start sequence. They actually send you an A4 page that gives you all the start and stop. And once you know it, it's
easy. I've done it. It's not hard.
Once you know it's easy. Yeah. But that first time when you're suddenly alone, you've got this sheet of paper and you're trying to start the car and go through it all. It's like, the anxiety is overwhelming. Once you get going, just everything is just in another world, and some of it you can say is harsh, but actually when you get back out of it, it's like you've done a moon landing. The accomplishment of actually driving it, and it's very easy to drive on the road, very easy to drive. Okay.
Well, and the other thing you brushed over is it not only is it's like active hydraulic suspension that. I read a whole 3 chapters on it. It's so complex. Like it's like a lot of people say, "Oh, we have active suspension," but they don't really. They have like, this is like the ride head is constantly set. There's it's wild. The whole thing is just. What my takeaway was when they said, "Yeah, we're building an F1 car for the road." Like until I drove it, I'm like, "Well, everyone says that. Like that's marketing." Pardon my French, and. They built an F1 car for the road. I mean,
I don't know, Johnny. Have you actually driven an F1 car?
I'm too fat, but it is like just the most uncompromised thing.
What's the is it a Ricardo transmission?
Yeah,
it's 8. How many speeds? 7.
7. It's 7 speeds. 7 speeds. Yeah.
7
But hang on. Like there's a transmission, but that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is the hybrid motor. Like when it shifts, explain what a gear shift looks like, because this is beyond bonkers.
I'm probably not the best person to do this. Anyway, the gearbox in itself is a science experiment. Fraser Dunn, who was the chief engineer, that's what he used to constantly call it. It's just a science experiment, the gearbox. He was like...
Also, real quick, also fully stressed, direct bolted to the engine.
On the back?
Yeah, on the back of it. But it's also the frame of the car, the transmission and the engine.
So when you actually start the car and you move off, the gearbox, the motor is on the gearbox. It acts as torque infill, basically, to get the best out and to get the good use out of the 11,000 RPM. The motor was there to torque infill at all low ranges, including pulling away. So actually pulling away is super seamless, but it's quite odd for the beautiful noise the engine makes. You actually pull away on a motor.
So the engine is idling.
Engine has to run for electrical reasons.
Yeah.
But
How high is it idling when you're just under normal or when you're pulling off? Is it? It's not like 11,000.
No, it's like 4,000 or something. or
Maybe even
less.
slightly
Yeah.
lower than that.
It's a pretty high idle.
Yeah.
And so it's a lovely sound. It's like
From the outside, if you're outside the car, it's
Yeah,
fantastic.
from the inside, it's intense.
okay.
I mean, the only thing I've been in equivalent is a helicopter.
Oh,
Basically, it's full on, but it's just. I mean, you imagine the car. It's Adrian at one point had this vision that this was a car that you drove to the supermarket and picked stuff up. You could, as long as there's no one in the passenger seat.
Right.
But actually, it's all about experience. It's that the vibrations, everything. When you get out of it, it's just another thing. It's incredible.
But hang on, the transmission. So the hybrid motor not only does torque fill between gear shifts, but if my understanding is correct, when when a shift is going to happen, the clutch opens, the hybrid motor torque fills, and then seamlessly speeds the transmission up to the speed of the engine, and then the clutch closes. So it does a torque fill, and then there's no synchros in the gearbox. So and they're dog gears, so they have to be matched exactly. It's the wildest thing. It's just like
I was gonna say part of that is available, but not without synchros.
there's no synchros.
Yeah. Okay.
So the hybrid motor does I wrote about it. It does like 7 different things. It was completely wild, and does regen braking, and again is torque filling and synchronizing the gears in like a split second. It's I don't know how you didn't just do 2 motors, but
So-
Well,
but-
that would have been more weight.
yes, well,
and space.
that's the
and-
Newey thing, right?
yeah.
It's like everything.
I get that it's a very a lot going on. It's an experience. Like the road feel must be insane, and the noise and the sound. But are you exhausted when you get out driving it? Are you like?
No, I wouldn't say so. It's quite overwhelming. So even my son was just came out of it going, whoa, that was another thing. And
It feels like when I drove it, it felt like a race car. So I've driven stuff the Bentley Pikes Peak car, the Pagani Huayra R, which are like track only. That's what it felt like. It felt like a race car. You're really, you're in a weird position. You're cramped. You have to, there's no airbags, so you're in a 6-point harness. It's very
Sounds
racy.
exhausting.
It's
Is it like
an
it's like
F1
getting
car.
it's like getting your ears cleaned, or like the first time I went to a Korean massage, I got this whole full body scrape down. I was like, I feel like a baby.
No.
Like is it like that? Like you feel like renewed? Like you have a new sense of
I think there is a bit of that renewed when you get out of it because
you see the world differently. Like I mean, really, like you are a car designer, right? You've had a long career. Is this like this the most single driving experience you've ever had? Like you got in and you were one way about the universe, and you got out of it, you're like, oh my god.
I
Speaking of being a virgin on a podcast, right? Like, is it like that? Is it like now I listen to things?
Now
as I walk out afterwards and go, I'm a different man.
Right. Exactly.
Johnny and Ed.
You're welcome. We'll smoke cigarettes afterwards.
Yeah.
No, but was it something like that, or you like?
It is something like that.
Okay.
It's that powerful, that brutal. It's also, I think, it'd be interesting to get Johnny's view on this as well. Obviously, having spent the 6-7 years doing it, to then experience and understand everything all the effort you put into it, and why all those long arguments, and just see what it's capable of doing. Because I've driven fast cars, and then I go into this, and just the way it delivers it. I mean, it is like a race car, and it's brutal, and yet that engine is just so sweet, and you just want to go up and down basically the gearbox just to play with the engine. And, the first time I properly got to drive it was in Bahrain on a racetrack, and it is the best place to experience it. It's good on the road, in fact, and, I drove to Silverstone, I went through horrible traffic and all those sort of things. But actually on the track is where it's absolute weapon. It's
look, if we could do it again, I would. If you could have brought the car to like Laguna Seca or a track I had memorized, because
it's hard.
I only had 4 laps when I was there, and I had driven Bahrain previously, but you forget there's a lot of first and second gear corners, and they're just tricky corners in any car, let alone this thing. And I was trying to dial the traction control as low as possible. So I wish I would have had like, a couple of days to drive it. I had to like cram everything into a few moments. But
Okay,
I
you
will say,
you elitist.
hang on,
So
hang on. But I must say, Bahrain, which by the way, Ed is driven in a Lamborghini.
at night.
Mr. Elite. The experience of that front straight at full watt and getting up to 11,000 and then shifting that's why I got into this business was for that moment. I mean, and I wrote that in my review, but like there's nothing else like that. I mean,
Well, that's where I want to jump in.
Car,
that's where I want to jump in because
like,
for the folks playing at home, is there something? Because there are cars. I mean, there's a RX-8 rode over 10,000 RPM. You can get close. There's some street cars. You can
not
get
a
up
V12
there.
though.
But there's a long history of British cars that are super lightweight. So you talk about like a Lotus Elise or an Exige. I was thinking like because of the spindliness of the Valkyrie, is this like a Caterham sort of like? Would you say like is it like that lightweight, like kind of?
I mean,
but it weighs about the same as an Elise. It's not much more.
Elise is quite a raw experience, and you can hear every linkage in behind you. There's a bit of that, and you get that with a Caterham. But it's the fact that you lie into this tub.
Oh, right.
And you feel all the vibrations. I mean, a go-kart is maybe like a two-stroke go-kart is maybe also the only other thing I've driven.
But to your point, and one thing I think it's because I saw the diagram in there. You described the seating position. It is F1. Your feet are at the same height as your heart, basically, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest challenges. So sometimes I felt like when we started this program, it was like, I mean, at that point I'd had 15 plus years of experience in the car industry. And at that point, you pretty well know how to do a car, all the technical bits, you know most of the rules. And then this thing came along, and it was like being fresh out of school again. And the big thing with that, and probably the first year alone, was taken on the occupant. Actually, it's a slightly tedious, boring bit of car design, but the person inside it takes up a lot.
Adrian seems to have a problem with.
Yeah, it takes up a lot. So actually, the picture we looked at, Jonny, earlier with Marek and I, that is us the first time sitting. So Adrian had come up with this seating position, and he actually used a scan of Danny Kvyat, the F1 driver.
Right.
And he'd put Danny Kvyat sitting next to Danny Kvyat in this thing. So, little jockey-sized F1 guy.
Right.
And we're like, and Adrian's skinny and everything as well. And we're like, our customers come in all shapes and sizes. We can't just sell to the ones that are 5'2".
Right.
And so we made very, very quickly, we made a model and sat in it because we didn't believe you could fit two people in the car. So that's me and Marek the first time sitting in it. And actually, the look on our faces is actually, this is doable. You can make it.
I don't know about Marek's face. He looks like...
No, he's like, no. Well, by the way, though, Miles, you're about 6'2".
Yeah.
Medium build. Marek is like my size, but 6 inches taller. He's 6'4", 6'5". He's a very large gentleman.
So we were the dummies, basically. If you could fit us alongside each other, we thought basically probably you're not going to get too many customers that try and fit two 6-foot tall drivers next to each other in it.
Right.
Although I should point out, because I remember at Bahrain, everyone's like, yeah, Marek can fit in it, Marek can fit in it. Then I came in and I'm like, can Marek fit in this with a helmet? And everybody started laughing at me like, no. With a helmet?
With a helmet, because you can... So basically we had to design the seat so that... to the limit of the rules. So in most cars, basically when you...
There's a seat.
Well, most cars, there's a seat, yeah. And that seat moves and the pedals are fixed and the steering wheel moves. This is the other way round in that the steering wheel and the pedals move, but the seat is fixed. So fixing the seat, why do we do that? Because basically when you hit the brakes, your body moves forward. Now, if you do that with a seat that has 50 different positions, you can imagine the envelope just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
If you can fix it, then the head trajectory is one relatively simple curve. So by holding the driver in one position, you can basically make the cabin of a car smaller.
But also, there's no seats. I mean, you're sitting on the tub with like a pad, right? So leather or something.
Well, that's how they could do it too.
So
right?
we had to go through the rule book and even understand. So you can. There is a seat back, so I think you and me, Johnny, we didn't have it in the car,
Okay,
but you can
okay.
for shorter drivers. You can have a
Okay.
seat back,
Right.
but we had to even go through the rule book and like, can you that seat back? Does it have to move? And if it moves, can you use a tool?
Right.
To some sort of screwdriver or something to move it? And basically, we were searching through rule books looking for rules that no one's
Right.
really looked at. Very.
But again, because I've read this book twice now. When you did crash testing, and you guys, I didn't realize you do this. They did a front offset crash, which is like the hardest crash test to pass at the moment. That's when.
Well, you have to do it for the U.S., right?
Well, but no, they're doing it for everywhere.
Europe, yeah.
But so a front offset is 40% of the front gets crushed in, so it's at an angle, and it's like 40 miles an hour. It's a pretty fast rate of speed. And they put wet paint on the dummies' faces, and that way, if they hit anything in the cabin, they can
Red
see it.
and blue clown makeup.
Yeah, and I was shocked because of how tight the cabin is. Like there was no contact on an offset, which is crazy.
It was a huge effort by the team to get that to work because all the way the belts.
Yeah,
I mean they were again observing some of it, which was beyond my scope. But you'd have the guys talking about it and actually designing the belts and how they're even, if you looked at the belts, there's even stitching on it, and that's all designed to rip under certain loads and basically unload the driver and keep the G levels down.
right.
And you're sitting there going, I didn't know that stitching was for that. Is that what it is in a race car? It's like,
I thought it
that's
just
wild.
looks nice.
yeah.
But you didn't. So the seating position itself, Formula One drivers sit. They're basically lying down. Their feet.
Worse, your butt is below your feet.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's like being in a suspended, like in an easy chair, right?
So the description is always lying in the bath with your feet on the taps.
Right.
And it is pretty well done.
How do you do that in a car that you're theoretically supposed to be able to get in and out of as a guy who can afford a $2 million car, right?
That was, again, long conversations. And this was the thing. It was like, if you're going to take, honestly, the thing with Adrian is like, if you didn't think, if you didn't engage with the fact that we will go and take this to the extremes of what you're allowed to do, then it's like anyone can go and do the car. You had to have this sort of, and it sort of goes back to the Oppenheimer thing, strangely. If you wanted to go there, you have to do everything in your power, every rule, everything. So even, again, going back to the human in the cockpit, normally you've got a load of regulations around your eye and what you can see in the car. You've got regulations about crash tests. And in a normal car, all of those are done on one mannequin setup. But we went through the rule book and realized actually there's 3 separate setups. And those setups don't have to be the same. So you can take advantage of every single one of them. It's just in normal cars, you don't need to. They just make it easy because then there's one point of reference. So everything in the car was set up. So all the eye points were set up on one, all the crash positions set up on another, and basically everything taken so that you could get the cockpit and the size of the car. Now, I keep saying the size of the car down. The reason was his aero, because Adrian... That's his thing. That's where he comes from. And basically, he just shrink wraps everything and then makes you argue for every millimeter.
So talk about the front end, which I know you guys wanted to make it look like an Aston. He didn't see why it should look like an Aston Martin. Right?
Yeah.
And so you said, no, it has to have the mouth opening and the S curves or whatever.
Yeah, the sort of moustache line, or the S curve, as we call it on the top. And basically, we were willing to do almost everything, but it still needed to be an Aston Martin. And we did get into some good, lively conversations with Adrian on this, because he's just like, it's stupid, it's useless, it's worthless, and you would get a barrage from him, and you'd have to, really. I think Marek and me thought we were difficult customers on like arguing about points that we were passionate about until we met Adrian, and then realized like.
So I can't even kind of repeat these conversations I've had with Marek, but like he's imposing. Like very few people in this industry, kind of intimidate me in any way.
Designers are usually like the nice guys.
But he's not only physically imposing, but he's a tough hombre.
Yeah.
And I like when he was telling me like the way Adrian would talk to him, And I'm like, you'd put up with that? He's like, like kind of,
But it raises a good point, right? This is a hypercar. This is supposed to bring this a halo car, right? Brings what point to I will tell you, Mr. Newey. Like, what point is it if nobody recognizes it's an Aston Martin? If it just looks like some alien ship that goes driving the street, you're like, wow, what a cool looking car. But you didn't connect it to the Aston Martin DNA or legacy, right?
So there was two parts of that, and and to the point about Marek and the way Marek and Adrian used to converse at points. It goes back to the thing again. I think for me, it's like you take influence, don't you? And this was a one in a lifetime possibility to take influence from the world's greatest race car designer. So again, if you didn't listen to him, so a lot of working with Adrian was always from a designer's point of view, but Adrian, why? Why do you need it to do that? What are you trying to do? And can I then do what I want to do and what you want to do at the same time? So I sometimes think back to it that I was more negotiator than designer actually on the car.
But isn't that largely the case as you ascend, and especially in big car companies, which I guess we'll talk about, like.
It is
consensus building.
But I think
teams.
designing, because there was a very small team from our side on it. We were probably a core of 7 people from design. Where take an average project, you're 30 people from design. So very, very small team.
How do you win an argument if that's, I don't know that's the right way to turn it, but how do you convince Adrian Newey that, you know what, we got to put the car needs a badge, or it needs the S curves? Like, how does that, and also then talk about the badge, because that's one of my favorite parts.
So the S curve, in the end, that was one of the few times I think we just said, look, sorry, Adrian, that is DNA. We've moved everything out the way.
But how did he stop fighting? Because
we literally had to go through the archive and show him stuff and basically say, look, every single car, actually, even when the vane grille isn't present, because that's actually, that's the thing we have the trademark on. That's the thing. But actually, what's always present is this S curve on the front that frames the grille.
Yeah.
So we basically look, the most famous Aston Martins, there is one that doesn't have it, but we never told him that.
Nice.
There is one.
DB2? Which one?
Yeah. No, it's you're in the sort of right era, but
okay.
I won't
Okay.
tell. But the badge was and actually that's again. So the badge is a great example of it. So I was in his office one day, and he's just like, I don't want the badge on the car.
And this is the Aston Martin wings that sit on the front of every Aston Martin.
It's arguably the most beautiful automotive brand.
Yeah.
Logo mark.
Yeah, but it's a steel.
Well, it's the base of it is a copper.
Okay.
And then it's plated, and it's basically built by in the jewelry quarter in Birmingham. So it's a proper piece.
It's on your lapel, actually, for those watching at home. Yeah.
Right, but it's the logo. It sits on the nose of every Aston Martin.
Yeah.
Its wings. It would fit perfectly on a car named the Valkyrie.
Yeah, but I love that he says it's useless.
So he said it was useless, and beyond that, he was just like, "What?" He was tough for me. What idiot would put this on the front of the car? And I'm like, "What do you mean, Adrian? What idiot?" I'm like, "It's our badge." And
it did interrupt the airflow.
Yeah. So what he then explained is, so the nose of the car, unusually, is basically the fourth element of the front wing. So the whole front clamshell acts as part of the whole aero system on the front of the car. So he's basically saying, why would you put anything, if you think of a plane, why would you put anything on the leading edge of the wing? It will stop it working properly. And he says, not only that, it sheds all tiny vortices around the cabin and it ruins my aero. So it's not only, it weighs, I can't remember what it weighed.
No, I knew this.
I've got it written down on my phone. But
it was like 100 grams.
Yeah, 100 grams. And he says, and it's useless. It's useless. I don't want it on the car. Everyone knows this will be an Aston Martin. You don't need the badge. And basically says, you need to go back to Gaydon and tell Andy Palmer, I'm not putting the badge on the car.
And then you did.
Well, no.
I remember this very clearly. So I drove off, and it was such a difficult discussion. I actually pulled over from the motorway because I had such a bad migraine from this argument with him that I couldn't see. So I sat there for 15 minutes until I could see again, and off I drove back to Gaydon. I got back in and was chatting to the team, and I was like, what do I do? How do I tell Andy what Adrian said? I'm like, I want to sleep on it, basically, to understand. So I'm telling all the team this. One of the guys comes in the next morning and goes, so that conversation yesterday, I've solved it. And I'm like, right, okay. He said, so I've been investigating, like, different techniques, like working. He was a guy we had who basically just did innovation, like with materials and everything. And he just said, I've been developing these badges, and they're microns thick. So he said, I'm going to go and make you some badges, and we're going to go and test them. So this went from, and he was moaning at me that the badge was 4 millimeters thick. It's
Right.
Ruins his arrow.
Normal human terms.
Right.
Nothing.
3.99.
Yeah. Sorry, 2 decimal places. You're right. So he managed to get it down to, I can't remember if it's 7 microns or 4 microns, basically. So when you hold this badge, this is actually made out of stainless steel, and when you hold it in your hand, you can hardly feel it. You can hardly feel it in your hand, and it's so thin it goes underneath the lacquer. And the guys actually keep them in a small fridge, in like cold, with all the glue to keep them perfect. And when they come to paint them, they take them out of the fridge, lay them on the car, and lacquer it.
But it was 99.7% lighter than the actual badge, which weighs like
still unacceptable.
No. So this was, and I think probably our relationship was properly solidified at that point, because I went back to him with the picture of the badge on the scale, with its weight, and I was like, right, I listened to what you said, but unfortunately we are going to have a badge on the front. So all the reasons, because that was the thing, work with him and understand him. All the reasons you don't want a badge, actually you're fine with a badge. You don't want anything that weighs a lot. You don't want anything that upsets your aero. So we've met all your requirements. And in the process, we innovated. So that was like the best example of sort of the.
Can you do the imitation of him accepting? Was this like a dad when he was like, or was it like?
Yeah, no, it's definitely more.
Okay.
But the weight saving, we haven't really touched on this too much. But explain why all the bolts are metric except for 4 imperial bolts.
I don't know this one.
Oh
no, I don't know this one.
This is what your guys told me about it. So you're not American, so all the bolts are metric, except the 4 titanium bolts that hold the motor to the, or actually 8, I should say. The 4 transmission to motor bolts and the 4 motor to tub bolts, because even though they're the same length, because of the way imperial threading is, there are 1 gram lighter. They're 1 gram lighter per bolt than the metric equivalent. And that saves 8 grams.
Yeah.
And then as the guys kept saying, yes, but 1,000 grams adds up to a kilogram. So you want to shave every gram off the car. And so they were saying a Valkyrie toolkit is all metric wrenches and 1 imperial wrench for those bolts.
Huh.
Like it's
I got a lot of questions.
And Newey knew that. He was the one who said you're using imperial bolts here. The aerodynamicist talking to Multimatic, who's making the tub, and Cosworth, who's making the motor. By the way, it's an imperial size, not a metric size.
I got a ton of questions. So, just back on this, how do you get in? Can you get in and out of this car without putting a hand on the floor?
Yeah, it's like a Lotus. You step on the seat and sit down.
Yeah, you basically you walk into the car. Basically, well, if you're my height, you basically just you can either sit on the side of it, so you open up the gull wing door and you can sit on the car.
Turn around, put your butt down, and then swing your feet in.
Put your feet in. Basically, what you need to do is be able to like a single seater, like a Formula car. You basically want to be able to stand in the car, and when you can do that because of the gull wing doors way above your head. And basically just hold on to the side and push, throw your feet down into the footwell. And you can do that because it's got a removable steering wheel. So you basically hold on and just throw your feet down to the footwell, and then you're into it, and you've got to then.
And again, one of these multi-billionaire Masters of the Universe types with well fed. This is something you can do.
yeah.
And
Well, I mean, I remember very well how I did it because I've
I
done
wasn't
it twice.
talking about you.
I've probably gotten into a Valkyrie 4 times now
Look at
because
you.
I got into it at the motor show, and then I got into it 3 times in Bahrain. But like, yeah, no, and then I've been into the race car twice.
Yeah.
So 6 times. You put 1 foot on the seat, 1 foot on the floor, squat down, kick your legs out.
And then all of a sudden, once you settle in, you're lying down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually it's what they term in Formula One lobster back. So you've got a very, very curved back, and it's super comfy. Basically, because
Weirdly comfortable. Yeah.
yeah, because normally you think you put in your average road car, you're putting most of your weight down your spine. You're obviously putting a bit through the seat, but in this, because of the curvature, almost all your weight is really evenly spread. So it's very we built a package back early on and got all the early customers into it, and the real surprise is they were all like, "This is comfy. I don't want to get out of it."
Right.
For you listening at home, it's like the Craftmatic adjustable bed in position number 4.
Yeah, it is.
Somehow, yes, I know where you're going. Yeah,
But it's also easier to get into a little bit because it's turned a couple degrees inward.
Yeah.
Like your feet are further to the right, or depending on
2 degrees pitch on the driver and passenger.
And your feet are ahead of the front axle, or no? No, just behind.
behind it.
Okay, that would be like true F1.
No, that would be like Can-Am.
Yeah.
So okay.
Yeah, that Can-Am's where your feet are the leading edge of the crest structure.
Right.
And again, that 2 degrees, we sort of just throw it out there. That 2 degrees is basically all to do with aero, just to get the front edge of the tub as neat as possible to get as much airflow through there.
Was that a fight? Was that like a Newey
Yeah.
thing where he's like, no, tilt the seats?
Yeah.
And then
Because, normal road cars, actually, if you go through, particularly Alphas of a certain age, they had all interesting...
Lamborghini, Murcielago,
But not necessarily.
pedals.
Yeah. Intentional though.
Yeah.
Dodge Viper.
So, there were early arguments on that because the thinking was to be the perfect race car driving experience, you had to be perfectly in line with the car.
Right.
And Adrian, with his vast experience, was basically going, no, if you go and look at a lot of cars, actually, they didn't do this. And actually, you can live with a degree of tilt in it and no one's going to notice.
And what was the worry was that the drivers would understeer one direction, oversteer another direction, and they'd be off.
Yeah, they'd be off.
And it turns out the brain just accounts for it. And it's not a
And
big
he even
deal.
used karts. So if you look at go-karts, you don't sit straight in them often
Right,
because of
right.
the engine and the radiator. You're offset and you adapt.
So it's like NASCAR,
But
only turning left.
It was
Yeah.
from Newey's perspective, or wherever they met over in a bar and talked about it. It was always conceived as a 2-seat from the beginning, or did Newey like a single seat, or was there some weird like front and rear configuration?
No, always
or-
2 seats side by side.
And always, are they all left-hand drive, or did you build any
No,
right-hand
there's
drive?
right-hand drives as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what? So what is does the passenger side? Can you just put it over, or is the passenger side totally compromised?
No, they are. So in the road car, their driver and passenger are completely symmetrical.
Okay.
In the AMR Pro, they are actually different. So they're only left-hand drive, the Pro cars.
And I will say the passenger seat in the Pro is pretty uncomfortable.
Right.
Fun,
Yeah.
but pretty uncomfortable.
So the tub is even. So there was a moment when we were doing the tub for the road car where he was technically, I probably can't tell you the name that he was given by Adrian on the podcast, but he was a
Well, you could.
95th percentile Dutchman. I'll leave the rest of the
I
imagination.
can imagine. Yeah.
Does the
yeah,
word have a C in it? No. F.
Yeah.
what's that?
yeah. Probably F and a B. But go ahead.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay.
And
Thick Scottish accent.
Oh
Go
yeah.
ahead.
Yes, I know exactly.
Yeah.
And he basically, because that, again, you use these sort of mannequins when you're in road cars because basically people are different sizes. And actually, even then, it's like you discover lots of people. I have this thing now when I look at people after doing this project, I realize, you've got short legs and a long body, or, because you find all these, it's not just one like thing. You could
Right.
get someone who's far shorter than me, they get in the car with a helmet on and they'd have they'd have a problem because you realise they have a very, very long body.
You know, I have pretty short legs for some of my height, and my head was. That's why I said I said like, well, American getting here because I have a longer torso.
But having done this project, these are things I notice about people.
Right.
So I can't remember where I was going with that now.
Adrian,
so with the tub, basically, we made this agreement that this 95th percentile Dutchman would define the limits of the tub, because Adrian just kept on trying to push the tub further and further in to get more space to the radiator.
How big is Adrian?
Adrian must be 5'6", 5'7".
So he's a smaller gentleman,
and he's very skinny.
Yeah. So he's the size of an F1 driver.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
So I had to go and negotiate with the tub and basically say, look, this 11 millimeters on your hip, if you don't do it, basically there will be people who just can't get in the car. They haven't got skinny hips like you. We need width at the hip. And so I managed to make him agree to this 11 millimeters, which I got a round of applause from the team. And again, maybe he doesn't know this, but they gave me a round of applause because basically they said in their time they only would win 1-2 millimeters off him, but it was unheard of to win 11 millimeters back on an aero subject with him. So he did it. What was funny though is when we built the AMR Pro, he took it away without telling us.
That's probably why.
And when we got into it, and it was just like we had to fit 2 drivers into it, because again, Adrian's just at that point. The car was going to Le Mans. He was focused on that. You know, he wasn't really thinking about the track version that we had to do of the car. And so when we got to do the track version, obviously Le Mans didn't happen for us, but we went and did the track version, and we were like, you can't fit 2 people in it properly any longer. Not like we used to.
I'm about 250 pounds, maybe a little bit more these days, and I fit in that passenger seat. So big people can go in the AMR Pro passenger seat.
Yeah.
And that's
but you're squashed in it.
Not only are you squashed, you have to sit with your left arm gripping your right shoulder because you touch shoulders with the driver, but they need their right arm to move around. And it's. I mean that thing is insane. The track car. I mean, look, the regular one's insane, but the because it's on slicks, the track car. Like I've never experienced anything like this. But the first time he really hit the brakes, I felt all the blood pool up in the tips of my fingers. Like it was that extreme, and I was just like, oh, okay. Now I understand why race car drivers they always talk about G-force. I've never experienced that before. It was that was wild. That was wild.
So the vehicle was delivered or has been delivered. You haven't delivered all of them.
No, not yet.
Okay. Wild success. Adrian, what color was he when like the first one rolled off? Was he like happy with it, or is it too many compromises, or like?
Honestly speaking, I think in his head there was too many compromises. I remember having a chat to him at the beginning of the project, saying basically, you know, you got to remember designing road cars is more like a marathon, less like a sprint. Because in F1, they can constantly change the thing. So even, you know, I was lucky and attended some of the early first tests of the F1 car, and they're there with saws, you know, cutting bits of carbon away. You can't do that with customers. So
right.
Their project is always ongoing, and so we have to freeze something.
They have an endless fire hose of cash. Like they have no budget.
Yeah.
I mean, they can just spend whatever. You know,
a bit like Valkyrie. But no, we had to freeze stuff, and you have to get manufacturers, and you have to say, I want 150 components, and you need to deliver over this time frame. F1, they make everything themselves.
Right.
Will there ever be another car like Valkyrie? Will there ever be something? Because even I know like the Mercedes Project One, like the engine was really tricky because it was an F1 engine, but the rest of it, like they didn't have like whatever it was, like 10 millimeters to thread a wire loom and hydraulic lines and all the, you know what I mean? They you know, it was just a normal car in that sense. Will there ever be another car like this?
I don't think so. The only thing is, I think things that have come on like the McMurtry then make me think actually there is this endless creativity in engineering and technology that it's not going to be the same, but maybe they will find another space. But yeah, while we were doing it, we were like, yeah, when any other car company gets their hand on a Valkyrie, they'll be like, they did what?
Yeah.
They did. They've done it that way, and the complexity around it.
Let's. I love that you brought that up because I want to talk about McMurtry just real quickly as a little sidebar. What are your thoughts? So for those of you who don't know, there's this. It's a fan car, I guess is what they call it. It's wild looking. The thing that it reminds me of most is actually that the Delta Wing Le Mans car. It's just like totally weird proportions. This thing looks like a cartoon, right? It's narrow.
But it's on big tires.
Yeah, it's narrow. It's got tall tires. It's got a single cockpit, but in the center, it just looks like if a little kid drew a picture of a car at age 4 or something.
Yeah.
But
it's sort of like a squashed Lightning McQueen look. But
yeah, it is fast as. It is so fast.
Quick. Yeah.
This car and Gordon Murray's car. Ooh, okay. So let's start with the McMurtry. Because this thing has been running up and down Goodwood, breaking all sorts of records.
Oh, it has the outright record. Yeah.
Yeah. I watched it the day it did that record. I have to give that team a lot of respect. It has why I like it. It has from the outside a similar level of focus to achieving something that Valkyrie did. It pushes everything. Even the scalar car, when you see a picture of it, you don't realize the size or the proportion of the thing. It's tiny.
Yeah.
And it looks like it, got stuck in the photocopier and it's a different scale to everything else around it. And yet it's so fast. And the way it uses its fan and what it does with it. And then also when you see it at Goodwood and it sucks all the dirt and all the dust off the road and spits out the back, that visually and the noise it makes is just, it's totally engaging, but it's an EV.
Yeah.
So I think it's the first EV that I can remember at Goodwood, and I've been going for a very long time, that everyone just stopped dead and went, wow, that was insane. But there was no V12 singing or no V8 or...
What does it sound like? Is it just you hear this fan running and it just sounds great, like a
jet,
like a jet,
like a jet.
And it's funny because if you don't know, the concept of a fan car isn't. It comes from F1. There was an era, and where
it was Gordon Murray's car.
It was Gordon Murray's car, where you use the fan to basically it's like a vacuum cleaner. Literally, you're sucking yourself to the road.
Yeah,
you
it had
create
fairings
downforce.
that touched the ground all around. You had a snowmobile motor that was just sucking the car to the road.
It's like it's a reverse of a hydrofoil.
Yeah, and it was outlawed after one race or something like that.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure how many races, but it was outlawed.
It was outlawed. I think it was one race because there was no rule against it. They were very quickly.
It's same with the 6-wheel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That did a season, I think. The Tyrrell was it?
Yeah,
I think that did a season, and then they said 4 wheels. That's
Okay.
that's a rule.
So you're a fan. You're literally a fan.
Yeah,
Zing,
literally.
fan. You're literally a fan of the McMurtry fan car. But I saw you wrinkle your nose a little bit about Gordon Murray's other car.
Before you answer, I was hanging out with Dario Franchetti yesterday, and the Gordon Murray Automotive T33 Spider, and when Valkyrie was mentioned, they wrinkled their noses at Valkyrie. So,
Okay, so you're saying I'm free. I'm free.
It's on, yeah.
Okay. Again, it's an exceptional car, but there's a bit of me that it's like McLaren F1 version 1.5. There's a lot of it that I'm not sure I feel like. If I look at, so it's got a fan on it, but if I look at everything forward of it's the same.
They sort of forgot to design it also.
And I just think, Gordon clearly is a very bright guy. There's he's able to innovate. There's somehow, when I look at the car, I was expecting to innovate again,
right,
a further step, and yet what I see is a version 1.5. And of course, from a customer perspective, actually, that's great. That's exactly what everyone was after.
Oh, yeah.
They were
Right.
like, I love the F1. And actually, the F1's a funny car. It didn't sell properly back in the day. It was way ahead of its time. And now, super valuable.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, Gordon Murray Automotive Type 50. This is also a V12.
Cosworth.
V12, right? Manual transmission,
Yeah.
mid-engine. And it builds upon Gordon Murray's most iconic, arguably, it's one for the ages, the F1, McLaren F1 that he helped develop. And that was famously had the triple seating, the center seat with the 2 flanking, and won a bunch of races
Including Le Mans.
Including Le Mans.
But
Yeah, so he can't be. As a commercial success, build the successor to that. A lot of people asking for it.
I can't criticize
Yeah.
the car, but do I like the car, and do I think that
It's as groundbreaking as a
yeah,
Valkyrie.
and there's lovely details. You go and look in the pedals and everything like that. There's clear care and love being put into it, but it doesn't excite me.
here's what I think the difference is, and what's so fascinating about Valkyrie is that you had an F1 team and a you guys make road cars, and like they're not even on the same planet really. And there was compromise, like we talked about. Like you got Adrian Newey to give you 11 millimeter. The F1, who I forget his name, the guy who designed the McLaren F1,
Pete Stevens.
Stevens, and Gordon Murray famously didn't want it to be designed. And I think with GMA, it's his own company. Hey, he didn't have any designers really. He designed it, and there was no one to tell him no to anything. And I think while most of his ideas are really good, my problem with that car, and I've seen it, and I'm sure it drives great, and blah blah, is that it doesn't look like anything. And hang on, doesn't look like anything. And where Valkyrie to me, I never even thought about how it would drive. I just remember seeing it in Geneva, and I hadn't felt that way since I'd seen a Countach when I was 9 years old in the streets of Montreal. And I just wanted to jump in the air and scream because it's just, I know you're sitting here, I shouldn't say this, but it's the greatest design. I love the Valkyrie. Whereas I've seen the McLaren. I saw a McLaren yesterday. Another McLaren, the GMA. Like, yeah,
Sounds like you need to smoke a cigarette.
No, it's just there's not a lot going on design wise. That's my issue.
The back is certainly of this car. If you just Google it, the back looks.
Yeah, it has a fan sticking out.
Yeah,
of the
it looks like the front is a little bit anonymous.
A lot of bit anonymous. But for $3 million or whatever, it's like shouldn't you jump in the air and scream when you look at it?
I can see where they came from with it.
Okay.
I can see where they came from.
But do you think how there's no one to tell him no is maybe not problematic, but why it's not as to me as interesting as the Valkyrie?
I think I always compare this with smartphones. So we've all got smartphones in our pockets. You can tell there's usually one brand that stands out, and you can tell how much care and attention, even though it's the same rectangular box, you can tell the care and attention and the discussions. It's inherent, and somehow as humans we can, without knowing the design story, you can see that. And I think with Valkyrie, what I hope is all the stress, all the arguments, all the discussions, the gestation of it. When you see the car finally and you walk around it, you can feel all of that. You can feel that there's been a battle over something, and it's now, I think what happens, and maybe what we're discussing with the Gordon car, you can see with Valkyrie, it's been stress test to its, it's got to its balance point where everyone ran out of energy, agreed.
money,
whatever it was.
But
you can feel that in the car. It's there every single. I mean, there's not a component on it that doesn't have like multiple. Even like the rear fender, there's the. So in a car, you've obviously got the air conditioning unit pumping air into the car, and you've got to get that pressure back out of the car. Normally, in most road cars, there's a little set of like things in the back corner, like vents that are taking the air out. But you can't do that in Valkyrie. So in Valkyrie, it actually uses the gap between the glass and the door, and the air goes through that, through the hollow cavity of the door, through the I know it's lost already, through the rear fender. So there's an inner and outer skin of the rear fender, and it travels through that, and there's basically a low pressure area behind the rear wheel, and it helps pull the air out of the cabin. So everything
does it work?
Yeah.
After Mexican food?
Wow.
But I'm bummed. Okay, so I do want to ask you a question that you set it up pretty well. First of all, are we done talking about Valkyrie?
I mean, I'm not, but go ahead. We can be done.
Okay. Because you asked it.
I'll close the book.
Passing all of these things through a 10 millimeter, like the hydraulic lines, the wire loom, and you asked Miles whether there will ever be a car like this again, which brings me to this question: is this the pinnacle, the peak of internal combustion supercar this day forward? Because you also mentioned McMurtry as record setting with some aero enhancement. But have we reached or now, because this is past tense for you. This is something you've been working on for like whatever 9 years, right? And you're off into you're probably 3 or 5 years in the future right now, right?
Yep.
So are we past peak internal combustion, and from here on out it's only going to be about these EVs and whatever hydrogen or whatever comes after?
I guess we'd all think yes. We'd all think, yes, that was probably peak. You know, us, AMG1, the GMA, we'd all think that's peak. But I think before those cars, we probably could have had the same conversation.
Right.
So I think you can just be surprised
Wise words.
what can come along or what someone can do.
So what you working on?
Yeah.
No, but maybe the last Valkyrie thing, but my favorite thing was the emissions testing of the V12 released more carbon dioxide than all 270 V12s will release over their working lifetimes.
Right.
Which means that V12s probably aren't that bad. You could probably still have V12s in small
Well, I
numbers.
go the other way, which is like, you know what doesn't have any emissions releasing when you're under any kind of development is electric powertrains. So
That's true. That's true.
yeah. Except if one of the conspiracy theorists who say, well, what about all the mining and all the trucks that do?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Look, you can get this, but yeah, it was that was shocking to me. Like that's that the emissions testing was more polluting than the engines would be, and it turned out that 11,000 RPM V12 is pretty clean. They there's a whole chapter about how they discovered it's like way cleaner than they thought, and they didn't have to like.
Yeah, because we were petrified. Quite honestly, we were petrified of getting the engine to pass. And Cosworth did just a brilliant job. And actually, it was, of all the technical challenges on the car, it was the first one solved. And we thought that it was going to be the thing that made the project fail, actually.
But there was like some weird back pressure. It turned out in the primaries or the headers, where it was just burning super clean, just like great,
And I swear we'll get off. But is it considered? And I know the company's gone through a lot during the gestation of this car, but is it considered a success?
I personally think it's a great success. If I look at all the, just in terms of thinking and the way we approach aero in the company now, and what we do and the way we approach packaging, like packaging humans into the car, that changed. So there's probably 100 small things that change having done the car, which have all been positive for the company. And, Valhalla comes next, and you'll see that thinking go into the next car because the team couldn't unlearn it. It would, and actually it's funny sometimes because I have to say to the team, you don't have to answer to Adrian.
So is it successful from the perspective of achieving the goal of an F1 car for the street? Like it was tested in 2020 by Verstappen and Alexander Albon. Would they? I'm sure it exists somewhere, but did anybody ask them that question? Are they like, yeah, this thing drives just like
those
my
weren't
RB?
even working cars.
No, I mean the cars they drove were real
VP4,
prototypes.
VP3. I've read this book too many times.
Yeah. They were very raw cars at that point. Basically, more than half the systems.
The hydraulics weren't there. Yeah. There's no active anything.
It's an interesting question. There is more than a handful of F1 drivers who own them, and we even had F1 drivers phoning up, pestering after the event, trying to get hold of one. So at some point we should go and ask them, shouldn't we? That'd be an amazing moment to see. But yeah,
is company owner Lawrence Stroll, is he own one? Is he a fan? What side of the fence is he on? Is this not a project that was birthed during his regime? Is he like on board, or he's like?
Yeah, I think he understands the level and everything. He has the respect to understand what the project was and what's gone into it. It was a difficult project. I think when he came in, we were in probably still the closing stages of one of the most difficult vehicle development programs we'd ever done, maybe the world had ever done. I don't know.
It's got to be the world has ever done. I mean, again, get the book, but like it was something crazy. It was like 2.5 years worth of man hours for the first prototype of the first tub, and then it was redesigned.
But it was getting all the systems. So normally what a car company will do is like they'll introduce a new engine into an old body. So, all the electrical architecture, everything else is known, and you introduce one new thing. And this was a science experiment. Everything was new, particularly for a road car, almost everything was new. And then you had to make all those systems talk to each other. And I remember the first time they ever got one running, this was like the first time a Valkyrie, proper engine, gearbox, tub moved. And the car was generating 20,000 error messages a second to itself, which you'll probably, if you talk to an engineer, they go, yeah, but most cars do that. But it was then, like testing it, we'd have to get the hydraulic system to work. And so what they'd always do is like they shut down everything and they only make one system work that uses hydraulics. And they'd be like, great, got that working. Then you'd switch on the active, boom, everything falls over again. And so basically they had to go through these stages of development that were incredibly painful.
And also, what was re-emphasized in this book was that like your days went to 1 a.m. and then you were back at the office at 7, and that Saturday and Sundays for months at a time, right?
Yeah,
I mean, and that people's wives were like, stop, like,
yeah.
if you want your marriage, stop working on this car.
There was a huge amount of human energy put into the car. It wasn't a normal project, and I think that was possible as well because everyone was very passionate. They knew they were making something that was a once in a lifetime. But yeah, there were definitely very, very difficult, dark moments on the project.
Right. What was the darkest moment? I know we're gonna get off it, but what was the darkest? Give us the. Was it when like Andy Palmer's suddenly gone?
I think it was, as I said, I think the realization of the work. So we'd got a car. Everything's tooled. We got a car, and now we got to make it work.
So the software integration.
The software integration, all the hydraulic system, mechanical systems, getting everything to talk to each other. I think the realization of quite how much work that was.
And that was, we talk a lot about software-defined vehicles and how like Tesla, without meaning to, really got a huge leg up because they just programmed everything. They didn't have to deal with suppliers. And so it was really easy to update their software. And that was my takeaway from reading this was like, the hardest part was the wiring loom physically, but then also like, oh, well, Bosch has to give us an update. It's going to be 21 days until Bosch gives us an update. And then Bosch has to talk to Ricardo, who has to talk to Cosworth, who has to talk to whoever's doing the hydraulics. And that was the most frustrating part was all the software stuff.
And I think that is now the case across the industry. I think the complexity of cars, that vehicle integration role has become another level.
Yeah, every auto manufacturer is hiring thousands and thousands of not hardware but software engineers for the first time, and it's I think not due to Valkyrie, but largely due to Tesla's success and just
to your point, doing over-the-air updates is a super challenging thing that every phone can do, but every auto manufacturer is struggling with the exception of some of these front-runner leaders. Yeah. Just to try to put a button on this thing. Holy crap! We started with Adrian Newey, Andy Palmer, Christian Horner, Simon Sproul. Where are all four of them now in relation to this project? Right. So now the whole company has changed. Aston Martin, when this thing started, they were only a sponsor of the Red Bull Formula One team. They've since become their own team since Lawrence Stroll took over.
Yep.
Took Racing Point, turned it into Aston Martin team. And now the engines, I mean, if this had been a few years later, this thing would not have a Cosworth engine. It probably would have had a Mercedes power plant if you follow that F1 race, maybe, right? But now, going forward, Aston Martin's going to have Honda powertrains starting in 26, I guess.
Yeah.
So where does that leave this project? And then the principles involved? Because Andy Palmer's long departed now, 2 years. 2.5 years, 3 years now at this point.
Maybe.
It's about 3.
Is it that long? Wow,
yeah, it's at least 3. Yeah.
And Simon is now with still
Red Bull because they're making a customer car, and I ran into him at Le Mans and he was like, "We're gonna have it. Like, come to the launch," So
And then of course Adrian's still with the team, but where and then Horner's. So it's Horner and Sproul working together now at Red Bull. Are they like? Did they get one? Are they like? Were they there for they're like, yeah, this is awesome, or?
Well, I mean, Christian and Adrian have both got a car.
so does Andy.
Andy has a
Palmer
car.
has a car.
Simon doesn't.
Simon's at a different pay scale.
Yeah.
For now.
I don't think Simon
can
likes
afford it.
driving fast though. So.
Interesting. I'll ask him.
Yeah.
He can. I think he can afford one. He lives in Newport Beach. He's fine.
Yeah.
He lives on a plane actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's true.
All right.
All right,
Let's
should we talk about Miles?
let's talk about Miles. Let's talk about what you're doing. What are you doing now? You mentioned Valhalla. What is Valhalla?
So Valhalla
Easy
is the
transition.
son of Valkyrie, basically. So it was basically you start at the top with Valkyrie, and then you sort of move down, and the intention is to have a range or a range of mid-engine cars. So Valhalla was the next step in that. It's more usable. It has, I'll call them conventional supercar doors because they're not conventional doors, but getting in and out of it is far easier. The space inside the cabin's far easier, and therefore, the start procedure and the stop procedure is far easier. So it's supposed to be a more usable hypercar, supercar.
And it's a V8 with hybrid assist.
Yeah, V8 hybrid assist, a lot of active aero on it, very high downforce as well. So it carries on lots of that thinking, but in a package that's more accessible, basically, I would say.
I mean, in some ways, it sounds like, except that it's a mid-engine son of Valkyrie. It sounds really more like the extension of maybe 177 in terms of being a little bit more, or is it a true track car, whereas 177 was a GT?
Yeah, 177 was a GT really. So it's more to the track bias. It sits a little bit by itself in terms of like the direct competitors. You probably have to walk down a little bit to find things like, I don't know, SF90. But in terms of its capabilities and what it can do, it's probably, it's somewhere between, sits in a land between sort of that and Valkyrie itself.
You know what I like is I just pulled up the Wikipedia on it. On the Valkyrie, the designer is listed for Valkyrie as Adrian Newey and then Miles Nurnberger. On Valhalla, it's listed as Miles Nurnberger and then Adrian Newey second. So now, how red is his face about?
Well, no, Valhalla is something we started in that, but in the end, it's really an Aston Martin project. But you can imagine a lot of the guys that started it were all guys that came off Valkyrie, so all had.
And it's one of the only cars I remember where I've seen now two different like looking versions of it. There was the one at Geneva, which looked like a buck. I mean, I was assuming you guys were so busy with Valkyrie that there wasn't really time to do, if I may.
Yeah.
And then at Pebble, was it last year? No, 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think 2 years ago.
You showed Valhalla, and it was totally different. It looked.
Oh no, sorry, it was last year.
Was it last year?
It was
Okay,
last year.
okay, because Tobias was still there. Yes, okay, but and it looked totally different than the Geneva concept car.
Yeah, I think the themes are still there, but basically we developed the Geneva show car that we did in 2019. Was really like the real seed of the project. So we're going to go and make a car like this. The basic design themes, particularly in the side view, are still all there. But obviously the car, it originally was envisaged with a V6. It's now a V8. So it's gone through its own development cycle. But I think it's gone through that if you go and look at a lot of cars where they properly launched a concept to production, it's gone through that normal.
I guess what I'm asking was the design we saw last year at Pebble. Is that the 99% of the final? Okay, so it's going to look like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when do they start being delivered?
Now you're asking a question now. So I think the first cars at the end of next year.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
And the engine is supplied by Mercedes-AMG?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that change at all with the Honda partnership? Are we no? You wouldn't.
The Honda partnership is with the F1
only
team.
F1.
Yeah.
So there's no trickle down if their power unit or MGU could come into a production car. That would be amazing. All right, but this seems almost done for you, the designer, right? I mean,
Oh, Valhalla, yeah.
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 you're like, no, you're
Yeah,
fine.
so we're sort of 3 to 5 years into the future pretty well.
So tell us about Aston Martin's $20,000 city electric car. Like, what is that?
The Cygnet was awesome.
Yeah, the Cygnet. I still think the Cygnet was a cool idea, maybe not executed in the
Collector's
right
item.
way.
I will
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
I will say this. I know a lot of Aston Martin collectors that want a Cygnet.
Yeah.
And while Aston did let me drive a Valkyrie, I begged to drive a Cygnet. They're like, never. You'll never. I remember it was Matthew Clark, former PR guy, who's like, as I live and breathe, you will never drive a Cygnet. Like, we'll never.
I get customers contact me on Instagram going, have you got any like hidden in a warehouse? Can I buy one? I'm trying to buy one. I can't buy one, and the price keeps rising of them.
People want them.
How about we all get together and just get the molds for the front and rear bumper,
And just make it an EV.
and then we just go buy the Scions and make these.
No, make it an EV.
Yeah, okay.
Give it some good. Well, speaking of which, Lucid, you guys just partnered with Lucid because now is that for? I would assume it'll be Aston, and is Lagonda as a brand going to exist, or is this outside of what you can talk about? Or
And didn't you were responsible for Aston Martin Lagonda as the relaunch? Right? I read that somewhere. in the
Yeah,
bio.
so we did the 2 concept cars that were shown in 17, 18, around there,
18,
around 18.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, moving forward, we want to concentrate more on Aston Martin, basically. So our EV future has a wing on the nose, a nice metal badge. Yeah.
Okay. So, and why Lucid? Why did you guys?
From a technical point of view, they were the team were very impressed, particularly with the motor technology, and obviously we're after performance.
They've got it.
and that's where it really came, and it just built from that. We obviously also have lots of mutual shareholders' interest, so I think Lucid were on the table even before, obviously, one of our shareholders, PIF, who are the major shareholder of Lucid now, but the discussions with Lucid had happened even before that. So there's sort of this, connection between PIF, Aramco that sponsor F1, us now.
And also, I mean, I don't think anyone knows this, and they don't admit it, but I've been in there and seen it. But like Formula E batteries are all made in California by Lucid, and I was watching.
Really? I didn't know they did those.
I was standing in the room, and like they had a McLaren box, and they were stuffing their batteries.
Well,
into
again,
a
their
McLaren
batteries and
box.
motors are very, very impressive. So
Yeah.
when we were looking for a partner to
Have you been to Lucid HQ?
I haven't yet.
It's pretty as close to like a Willy Wonka factory as car companies get.
Are you
Like,
you're driving to Pebble Beach?
I'm stupidly not. I'm flying
you
to San Francisco.
You could just stop right over.
I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty like their battery testing facility is like it's pretty geeky stuff. It's pretty cool. It's pretty
All right.
cool.
You successfully dodged my first attempt. I'm gonna try. I'm
What was
gonna
that?
I'm
What
gonna
was that?
try again. Are you working on anything that is not quite so much in the stratosphere for a somebody interested in Aston Martin?
Oh, like a
Like
cheaper.
like a new vehicle. Like is there a coming vehicle that you can talk about, or even just from a category perspective that would pique some interest? Like, oh yeah, we're working on, because you mentioned Lucid. Surely there's a GT, a 2-door, something swoopy that's going to have the wings. But is there something, I don't know, more broadly focused out there?
Are you going down market?
No,
Yeah.
Okay.
I could answer that one.
no, we're not going down
I
market.
didn't say it that way. Jesus.
No, we're
I'm
not.
supposed to say no.
No, not. But we aren't. I think we joked about it earlier. I think there is a super interesting project in an EV, small EV city car, Cygnet. But really, to make that viable currently is not where we're looking.
And you just brought in a lot of Ferrari people, and at the top, and like Ferraris never, they don't go down market.
No.
Yeah.
So interesting idea, and I think it's quite interesting in the last, say, 12 months. The company can generate lots of interesting ideas. I think the focus to pick the right interesting idea is really strong in the company. It is. I mean, you mentioned Willy Wonka. For me, we can generate lots of cool things that you'd like to do, but are they the right things to do, and are they the long-term future of the company? And I think we've definitely, in the last couple of years, got much better as a company, the clarity to say, really cool that, but actually, this is where the company's focus
and
is.
that might be like those Lagonda concept cars,
Yeah.
which I remember one of them was, it was a rolling bedroom, basically. It was pretty cool, but like,
Yeah.
you're not in that business.
So the entry point will always be, or at least for the near term, be at
Vantage.
Elevated.
Vantage, like which is 911
Turbo, but it's 911 Turbo.
yes, above.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
So
we're running out of time. When did you got into the business?
Yeah.
Lincoln. First
Yeah.
job out of school?
Yeah.
In the UK. No.
So,
you had Lincoln, Ford Lincoln.
So Ford Lincoln, we were a team formed in the UK. We were based out of Tom Wilkinshaw, TWR, Tom Wilkinshaw Racing.
Oh, nice.
And we were a team formed there almost, how many were we? 30 European designers. And this was when Ford had the Premier Automotive Group. There was Wolfgang Reitzler running it. And basically, he had a battle plan to basically make Lincoln a full-on rival to BMW and even probably go into Europe and all these things. So there was a team of designers that were put together in Europe, and then
Were you working with Murray Callum?
no. So this was Jerry McGovern, who
Okay.
was the boss, and then Marek.
Okay, so McGovern is
David Woodhouse and a chap called Phil Sevens. So they were the sort of
Yeah, and McGovern is a Land Rover Range Rover.
Yeah.
He's pretty legendary.
yeah. And Phil Simmons worked under Jerry doing the Range Rover. He also did the Ford Fiesta, the sort of outgoing generation, the first iteration of that. Very, very good designer. And David Woodhouse, who now runs Nissan's concept studio in San Diego.
Yes.
So we all got hired. We all thought we were going to Detroit. They sent the first 15 people to Detroit, and then the second 15 got sent to California. So I was luckily in the second 15.
Nice.
So I was based out of Irvine and lived in Laguna Beach and lived out here for about 2 years.
And you were 20,
Oh, yeah.
23, 24?
Yeah, something
Right
like
out of
that.
school?
Yeah, so it was an absolutely mega experience. Working, I think growing up, working in the US was always something that was impossible to do. It was so hard with visas and everything.
Yeah,
so,
right.
to go out there, live in California, live in Laguna Beach, 2 minutes to the sea from where we lived, and be part of that thing. And I loved living in America. I actually felt more at home when I lived here. I felt more at home living here than I did in England for some reason.
And where did you live in England? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Windsor, so
Okay.
just outside London.
Explains the posh accent.
Yes.
By the way, you know that the former PAG headquarters is now Taco Bell headquarters?
Yeah,
Yes.
I do. I've seen it. This is very sad.
It's an American story. What are you talking about? It's
really
beautiful.
sad.
It's,
Yeah,
it's meant
so,
to be.
so basically, the 2 billion we had turned into 200 million. Turned into. I remember a conversation saying, "Here's the Mustang door. Can you make a new town car?"
Wow.
So it fell apart, and this was all in Firestone.
Right.
Yes.
right.
Yeah. Explorer tire scandal.
So all the money went, and then I had a chance meeting with some people I used to know, and basically ended up at Citroën in Paris.
That's
But-
cool.
Let's talk a little bit about this pre-era Miles of always interested in cars, car crazy.
Yeah. So my sisters. I have two sisters, 9 and 10 years older than me, and they used to describe me as doomed, which wasn't nice. But they were like, "Your name, Miles,
Well, is that not good?
connected to cars,
Oh.
Nürburgring." My dad loved cars. He
Okay.
he was trained as a professional photographer and then ran an advertising agency. So I grew up basically in a design studio. After
wow.
school, I'd sit with all the graphic designers and the photographers, and so I was immersed in that. My mum was originally a photo retouch artist in the days of lead paint, and explains a lot. So that world, art design world, I totally grew up, and a dad who loved cars. So I went and saw my first Grand Prix went to Brands Hatch in what was 1984, 85.
No kidding. Okay.
So I was like
Good era, yeah.
8 years old.
Big V8.
My dad's teaching me to do panning shots.
What's he shooting with? Nikon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or Nikon?
Yeah.
And then what cars did he have?
He had a 914, a 912, a Lancia, Monte Carlo. Had 2 of them. First one he wrapped around a tree. Second one, the dashboard caught fire with my mum driving it while she was pregnant with me.
Nice.
Oh, that's good.
So after
Yeah.
that, you can imagine my mum was like, not having another one of these.
No more lunches, yeah.
But yeah, it broke down at the side of the road and flames started coming out of
boy.
the dashboard. So.
What did you take your driver's test in?
Oh, it was a horrible car. It was a Citroen AX. I worked for Citroen, but it was obviously way before that. Citroen
AX
AX,
is
which,
a
if you
very-
ever remember,
that's a
it
very
was
bad car.
It was. I think this piece of paper has more structural integrity than it just. Everything felt.
Yeah, that was one step up from like the Ami,
Yeah.
right? It was
It's a super mini, 86 to 1998. So
It
you would have
replaced
tested. You would
the
have.
Ami actually.
You would have taken the test in 1992 or 3, something like that.
Like that,
What do you? What can you? 16? How old? Or 18?
18.
18 to drive. Okay, so 98
But I was.
or so. You would have been 1998.
Yeah, it's around that 98, 99.
No, 94. Whatever. Okay. What were you driving when you came to the U.S.? What did Ford give you? Give you keys? Anything cool?
I drove a Mazda Miata. That's what I got given.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
So
Dude, living the life.
yeah, 20 years old driving one. So I was quite happy. And what was the other car? So, but we had like Lincoln Navigators at work that we could borrow and stuff like that. And we had the coolest car we had in the car park, being British, was a Mercury Marauder
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah.
at the time. So I
those were
learned
cool.
to do
Hang on.
burnouts in the
Yeah, yeah.
Irvine car park.
Yeah, the Mercury Marauder was a very cool car.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a super cool car.
And then, did you go to the Cars and Coffee with John Clenard? Did you ever go down there?
No.
No. Okay. It might have been a little bit early. That was the PAG parking lot was the birthplace of.
Yeah,
Cars
so
and
that was
Coffee.
after. Yeah, that was
After-
definitely
after.
after I left. Yeah.
Okay. So you did a stint at Citroen, working on.
I did a lot of concept work on things like concept car was called Sportlands, and it then became DS
Oh, Citroen DS.
5 or something.
Oh,
I
yeah.
did a lot of pre-concept work on what became the I'm gonna forget its name now. There you go. That's really good.
Ed's Googling. Don't worry.
The
How
the
about
car with
this?
the bumps on the side.
Since most
Oh, dust, not the dust.
Cactus.
The cactus.
Yeah, so I
Yes.
did some of the early work on Cactus, and then X7, which was C5 replacement, some of that, and then the C3 Picasso.
Oh, so you were there quite a while.
Yeah, 5-6 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good time. You fond memories.
Brilliant time. It was Jean-Pierre Pluy was it still is the boss man there, and he's very, very interesting guy. Most sort of people, designers you meet, you either decide, directors you meet, they're either with their head or their heart. He's with his gut. Fascinating, quite frustrating at times, but just a brilliant individual and taught me tons. In England, naivety is a bad word. In France, in Citroen, naivety is a good word, because it means your ability to switch off and start again and act like a child and draw something as though no technical regulation was ever there. And so I think for me, I had a second birth, almost rebirth, in terms of creativity working for Citroen and understanding how to pull it out of yourself. So it was super interesting. There was so much budget, so many projects. We did loads of internal projects. So I just think I don't think I could have gone anywhere. With Lincoln and Jerry, I learned all about brand. I learned about how to structure a brand. But actually, the design side was, if I look back now, we were quite slow in what we were doing. It was very procedural. Citroen was just like, you could do anything. And it's like your models would change. And sometimes you like the change, and sometimes the change was forced upon you. But you would iterate, so you would learn 3D what was right, and they allowed you to make mistakes, so you could get 30 things wrong, learn, and then get this one great thing at the end. So it was a magical place actually at the time.
So Southern California, Paris, Gaydon. Was that the next step?
Yeah,
the Midlands.
Yeah, so it was. So Marek, after I left, Marek went on to Detroit. There, and then basically stayed within the Ford family, and he became head of design for Aston Martin, and basically called me up and said he'd been there 12, 18 months, and called me up and said, would you like to come to Aston Martin? To which I replied, yes. It was a unique, particularly then, when I started, we were 19 people.
Yeah.
What year is
in
this?
the whole, this is in 2008.
Wow. Okay.
So we were 19 people. Very, very small team. It was a team that basically, because the way it sat in the Premier Automotive Group, it had been under, actually a lot of the Jag design team had been doing Astons as well as Jaguars.
And Ian Callum had just left, right? 2006?
Ian had already gone. Henrik had gone. So Henrik went off.
Henrik Fisker, yeah.
And that's when Marek took over in 2008.
This is perfect. This might be the only person who can actually answer this question, because we've had both Henrik and
we're friends with Ian and Henrik.
Who designed the Vantage?
Can you tell us off the air? Can we attribute it to someone else?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from my observations. One started it and did the basic forming of it, but the other one mastered it.
Right. So that's what
gave it some magic and flair that was not there because basically we were based in Gaydon, and we were the Lincoln, when we went from TWR, the Lincoln group went for TWR to the Gaydon studio, and when we were departing the Gaydon studio to go to America, Henrik was bringing all the Aston Martin work into the area that we were, so we got to see the handover, shall we say.
So what you said is I've from each side of that debate, I've heard half. So that's that makes sense.
The car was conceptualized clearly under Ian, but I think, because it's a beautiful car, it's quite a magical design, because it's very, very clean, but just has these. So I've seen it before and after, basically.
Wasn't it mid-engine at one point?
Yeah, it was as well.
I love that Vantage. I love the size. For me, it's the perfect size.
Yeah.
You know, I used to think it was really, really great, and then I saw it parked next to a new one, a Vantage F1, and it's like, boy, does that Vantage look old. The 2005 car.
Yeah.
Like that.
V12 Vantage, baby.
V12 Vantage is the greatest. That's the greatest. The six speed. The six
speed V12. I had one. I had one over winter in England.
Yeah, perfect.
And I always say it took me 2 months to make friends with the car, but once I'd made friends with it, it was just a riot.
I remember driving that car very well. It was right when I kind of started at MotorTrend in like 2010 or so, 2011. And I remember there was a friend of mine who I'd fallen out with, but he had the same level of appreciation for like British metal that I did. And I was like, I don't even like this guy, but I got to tell him about this car because it was so good. I was like, I'm gonna leave his name out, but I'm like, hey, like this is what I've been waiting for. Like this.
Both Adrian and Christian have one.
Yeah.
And if you want to see a good conversation, you just throw that one in, because they have very different opinions of why it's a good car or not.
I know why it's a good car.
Yeah.
Paul Barrett is why it's a good car.
Yeah.
Paul, I think now does racing for Aston.
No, Paul now works. He runs Jaguar Land Rovers.
Oh, he left.
Yeah, he left. He runs all the historic and SVO side of the business.
Oh,
yeah,
excellent. Okay, that's good.
So you might see him at Pebble.
Well, I'll see him at some point. But like I think he's wonderful, but he did V12 Vantage,
Yeah.
and the first one.
Okay.
And that
But by the time you got there, so what were you doing when you first arrived under Merrick?
177.
177. Because if you got there in 2008, that car
So
was
I went
out.
through from a 5-seat
Right,
compact
MPV, right,
MPV
right.
to 177.
Totally natural progression, right? And
Could,
all carbon
could we do
fiber.
a couple minutes on 177?
Yeah,
'Cause
let's
it
talk about
is such a-
177.
it's
I
such-
love it. But arguably, I think that, until I'd seen the Valkyrie, I still haven't seen one in person. But I saw the 177 at Pebble Beach, I think 3 years ago. Just parked in front of the Spanish Bay, and I was like, "Yeah, okay, that thing. Wow, that makes sense." But there's no way because you got there in
8.
08, and that car was on sale in,
Nine.
We showed it in 9.
Yeah.
and that's how fast you can go. Because how
Yeah,
much?
I mean,
how much it had started?
Nothing. Well, nothing. When I turned up, they'd basically engaged and they were doing like technical drawing layouts for what the layout of the car, how to get this. Because obviously we'd raced DBR9 at Le Mans, and basically that was a more extreme front engine. Because what they'd done with almost all our race cars is they pushed the front wheel forward to get the weight balance proper front mid-engine. So I think the team were looking a lot at that and basically saying, right, how can we draw that back onto the road?
So you had the hard points were fixed by the time you got there.
They were still under discussion. So we were given a bit of freedom in the early stages, still to push and pull where the wheel was, where the height of the car.
But like windshield and door
Oh
aperture.
no, that was all created.
Okay. And then materials were selected. There was going to be because it's full carbon body, right?
No carbon. Oh no, it's definitely not a carbon
No,
body.
it's aluminum and glue.
Oh,
It's
Right,
a
right.
carbon tub. I say
Right.
it like that because I had to live through actually the making of all the body. So it was an aluminum body or
right.
aluminium to say it correctly.
How do you say alumni? Go ahead.
And that process of making the body. So the first bodies were like the rear clamshell was
Okay.
made of the first few cars, because it was one of these sort of projects where they were literally, we were adapting the process because they were so handmade. The first cars was made of 13 separate hand-beaten aluminium panels that were then put on a massive jig and welded. And the minute you weld aluminium, it moves.
right.
So I
Should have made it out of carbon.
and
fiber.
honestly, having I know, having gone through the process, you're like, why would anyone pick? You would have gone carbon in
Right.
reality, but it's the beauty of the car. So I sat there. The first 3 Job 1 production cars, I pretty well sat there until 3 a.m. with the metal workers, because basically they would have to almost reshape every panel once it was welded to get it all back into shape.
On what? Like an English wheel? No. Like how are you?
No, they're
Like they just really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So my friend James owns the first. It was like not the. You guys never did a press launch, which drove me crazy. That was I blame Betts for that.
Financial crisis.
No, it was Ulrich Betts. Anyhow, he's laughing because he says I'm right. But the marketing car, let's say,
Yeah.
he owns it. It's in
okay.
Scottsdale, and it's okay. We're running out of time. Who came up with? And if it was you, awesome. The front intake vents
Yep.
that then feed through the body into the intake plenums.
So I came up with the vents,
Oh,
and then
the coolest.
Chris Porritt worked out how to actually use them for something.
Okay.
Because to be honest, I drew something, and they were just like, "What do you want those to do?" And I was like, "I don't know."
Okay.
So
Chris.
Chris was the one who worked out, and Larry Holt.
Because
as
I
well,
remember
'cause Larry Multimatics.
Right. There's a car dealer here, Galpin, and they have a vault, literally a
Yeah,
vault.
yeah.
Right. Okay, you've probably been.
Yeah.
And I remember I got invited before I was at MotorTrend to the vault to see the 177, and it just, I don't know, it didn't photograph well, I didn't get it, whatever. And I remember seeing it in person, just being like, oh my god, the scale of it is incredible, and like the interior is incredible. But then when I saw that, when they popped the hood or the bonnet, as you'd say, and the engine bay with the fire, the heat proofing, the silver shielding, and then the like vents feeding the intake plenum of the big V12, I was like, this is the coolest car in the whole world. Like this is.
And it didn't have. I thought it carbon fenders. No, every panel was aluminum.
But
Okay.
the roof, the roof was the only.
Maybe that's what.
But the intake plenum was carbon. It was a big carbon box that was being fed from the body of the car. It was just the coolest looking.
Yeah, it always
thing.
it annoys me to this day that car never photographs like it looks in the flesh.
Oh, yeah.
You can't.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it is.
Its name means one of 77 built, right? But are there not more than that? Is that really?
77.
Didn't you tell me there were more?
I think my friend I think has like number 78 or I mean he has like he has one that was like after the 77 were sold, it was
got a
like
Mustang,
it was like the
undercarriage.
marketing car or the
Oh, it was one of the VP cars.
VPs. It was a VP. Yeah. It was,
Okay.
it was like VP1 or something. What's they sold.
All right.
How did it not have a V name though? How did you get away from not being Vanilla or Venice or you guys
Vendetta.
Vendetta.
I can't quite remember. So I remember it was a lot just very fluid conversations with Ulrich on the name.
Right.
And we decided because the car, he wanted it to be a collectible. And so collectibles were always numbered. And we said, well, why not make it one and the same? So it's one of 77. And the 77 basically came from 100 he thought was too common, too many cars. 50 was too few to make money.
Yeah.
75 was boring. James Bond, 75, 77, 177.
I mean,
And that was literally the conversation.
That's some German numerology for you right there.
This just dawned on me. This is a terrible thing to admit. Were you on the original Rapide global launch? Oh, thank God.
Yeah, Ed crashed a Rapide into a Rapide.
Did you remember there was a story about how some dumb journalist drove one Rapide into another Rapide? Did you just?
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not really.
Rapide was just launching as I joined the company.
Oh, okay.
So I wasn't.
Yeah, Rapide was 2008. Yeah. I remember I had a press card. I remember being on a photo shoot and just like staring at the front fender in the flesh, being like, that is just ridiculously beautiful. Like most cars aren't like this.
Yeah. No, I was with another journalist who I won't name, and you swap, and and he swapped the car, left it, put the parking bar, and left it in drive, and had the steering wheel turned a certain direction, and I hopped in, and as I was adjusting the seat, I hit the gas, and the car hopped and turned this way and went into the car, which was great. Actually, I turned the wheel.
I don't think it was great. I think that was bad.
I know, but the best part was the dinner that night. Like, Ulrich comes in and lazy.
I bet he was really gentle. With
He came in.
Reasonable.
He was like,
reasonable.
hello everybody. Did you have a wonderful day? Yes. Everybody's okay. Yes, and all the cars are okay. It's quiet. What happened? That's why I pull aside. Who did it? That was me over here.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's great. It's quite awkward. Okay.
Well, it's DB12 Volante.
Yep.
By the time you hear this podcast, this will have been seen at Pebble.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about DB12 and DB12 Volante.
Yeah, so
These are the newest.
Yeah, these are the newest things, and they're it's called a super tourer, basically, because if you drive the car, it really takes the GT game on quite a bit for us. In the fact that we've always had the GT part in terms of the comfort, but I think if we're honest, sometimes we haven't had the right performance level. And this car really, I mean, not that they weren't performing, but this car really set an ambition on the performance side. So, I mean, I've driven a DB11 for years. The minute I drove a DB12, I'm like, wow, the turn-in it's just like another level on the car, dynamically another car level, but it actually rides better than the outgoing car as well. So it's given all this performance, but without taking any of the comfort. In fact, some of the comfort increases on it. So technically, a very, very big step forward for the car. From a visual perspective, it moves the game on, but it does it in probably more the way, if I look classically, how DB4 to 5 to 6.
Right.
It does it in that flow and that way. So it
Like you're iterating.
Yeah,
not-
we're
not-
iterating.
yeah.
We're not trying to do DB11. Honestly, at the time, we were pushed to try and make it more revolutionary because the company had been criticized a lot at that period for not doing anything and it's old-fashioned, and
Right.
so we were
Right,
pushed
right,
to
right.
make the car quite technical, even in design language. And I think with DB12, there's a more natural, a more, how do I say, just balanced way of being in the design language of it. It talks to many of its the cars from the past, where DB11 was a little bit, okay, it had relation with 177, but was more technical. This is much more rounded and muscular.
Well, isn't the criticism, or hasn't the criticism about you, about Aston, and it's interesting to hear it from you directly, being old-fashioned, more to do with the interior execution
it
than
was.
the exterior? Because the exteriors have always been like grand slams. Like,
Although
beautiful.
the DB11 was a departure. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, I liked it, but I know a lot of people are like, it doesn't look like an Aston.
I think that there was definitely a bit of that when we launched it. I think it's aged very, very well, partly because it was probably quite progressive at the beginning. It's aged nicely. Interiors, yeah. When we did launch recently, you know, I'm quite open and honest. I think that for many, many years, the inside of an Aston was exactly that. It was the inside of the outside. And that was the level of financial might that was put behind it. It was secondary. And I think the big thing with Lawrence coming on board is he has put money where it was needed and it was identified. And, you know, from a design team perspective, we were dedicated to interiors, 3 or 4 people on the design side.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
now, to give you the step change, we're probably 15 people.
Hmm.
So massive step change in terms of resource, and then massive step change in terms of like the bill of materials, how much we're putting in. The screens, when I was on launch, I was like, you know, I can't imagine 10 years ago saying that, well, these are the best, these are the highest definition, best
Right.
contrast screens available in the industry right now. You know, that would have
Right.
been a completely, be like designing a car with Adrian Newey. It would be unbelievable. It would be
I mean, look, and to go
Inconceivable.
that's what people look. They would look. You know this. People would knock what was in the DB11 and
Yep.
the DBS, and you know. But I remember being in the DB9, and I'm like, man, it's such a big. The DB11 was such a huge jump over
Yeah,
the
yeah.
pop-up TomTom in the DB9.
It was, but we've
Yeah.
really put the money in there. So there is huge effort that's gone in that. And you'll see that continue in all the, you know, the cars that we're working on for 5 years' time. What you see with DB12 today just carries on going. We haven't, that's not like, oh, we've got to about here and we're going to like, that was the effort over and done with. The effort really, really continues on interiors.
I mean, you have to, right? Because I think in the time that you've been at Aston, there are so many more sports car, supercar, hypercar manufacturer that are chasing the same. I mean, yeah, there are growing athlete, celebrity.com, whatever, millionaires. But I mean, you're trying to compete with the likes of, again, at the high end, the 911 guy, but then Lamborghini, Ferrari, all the way up to
Oh yeah,
Pagani.
Oh yeah, Pagani, Koenigsegg's, all them.
All
The
those-
Gordon Murray's.
A lot of the guys who actually don't sell cars in this country, but we somehow see them.
Show on display, baby.
Right.
The greatest.
Because here you're talking about how the car, the DB12, is better in every way, and but at some point, doesn't it get? I hate this sounds terrible. How can you improve? How can you do this continuous improvement?
Relentless.
Yeah.
But it's like that in any. It takes sport. Sport's the easiest way. The guy runs faster over 100 meters, and you think that's it, and then someone goes quicker and quicker. So there's always something. There's a technology or there's an input which, you know, improves the breed basically.
Performance enhancing drugs.
But also, though, you guys are getting into EV.
Yeah.
And I think and maybe not even necessarily EV only, but like with better autonomous driving and stuff, interiors are becoming more important.
Yeah, for sure.
And everybody and the industry is raising its interior game. And and again, it was I always tell people like, oh, I like this Aston Martin, and it was the first thing they always said is like, oh, like an old Mercedes navigation, and I'm like, yeah, but do you really care about that? And they were just like, it was just something.
Yeah, it was something.
It was
that
a
people,
weakness.
It was something that people got stuck on, and it's difficult even that for us, because actually, if I go and look in the automotive area, if I look at one company that's raised their interior standards, it's Mercedes-Benz, and actually their stuff is very, very good. If you jump into an E-Class, the level inside it, that must really shock their rivals when they turned up with that new increase. So they make great stuff, but there was an expectations when you get into Aston, you should see just Aston, and that's something we've done with DB12. We've made sure that all the touch points, they're still our technical partner. We still use their hardware behind the scenes, but everything you touch in the car, the screens that you get, they are all, they're all ours now.
Right.
Now we're all about to go to Pebble. This, for you guys listening, this airs after we've all gone to Pebble Beach, but I'm curious because your brand is going to have these interesting, has this lineage now where you had a moment where things were maybe underfunded, and you talk about the interior.
They had that like the.
I know throughout history, maybe this a little we're going to see. I think just from an exterior standpoint, I feel confident that we're going to see Aston Martins on the lawn, the 18th hole at Pebble Beach in 30, 50, 70 years. But I keep thinking about, because this is something that I heard when Mercedes, screens started going to cars, and Mercedes was like, really like, no, we're not doing touch screens. Like the oils on the fingers, the fingerprints, the wear over time. This is not a premium experience. Now everybody has it, but when you cast your mind forward to Pebble Beach, 2100, or like, how is this stuff going to age? Do you think about like, oh man, like, or are we going to look back at it as quaintly as, assuming we're all alive, like 8 tracks?
2100, we won't be alive.
I know, but eight track vehicles in cars, or like, do you think about this at all? You're like, meh, this is for somebody else to figure out.
No, we do, because I think for us, we're very, very aware of the trend on screens. It's not something in many ways that sits comfortably with us, because we've been a brand that is all about tactility. That said, we have to be in context with our surroundings. So, DB12 has got 2 screens in it. They're very good screens. But if you look, we're one of, I think there's a couple of brands out there that are now going, hold on, this balance is not right. And actually, particularly for us, if you want to be a sports car and you want, we sell cars that you don't need for normal reasons. You might need them for your personal reasons, on a different plane, but you don't need it. You don't have to have an Aston to get to A to B. So it's very much about like, what do we provide to the customer? Or what's the it's interesting. I was talking to someone the other day in design. I think the word design gets used less and less, and the word experience gets used more and more, because actually what we've been doing for years is designing experiences, and it becomes more apparent with this push for interior design, or this race that's been happening on interior design, is you're thinking constantly about experience, and that means your touch points, the tactility. It's something that was always there, but I think the emphasis has completely changed. So in DB12, we've made sure that we called them impolitely piss off factors, basically. So if I'm too hot or too cold, I need to, if I cannot change that instantly, the irritation level just goes off the chart. Right. And if I can't do volume instantly, irritation.
Tuning the radio?
Okay, no, we did.
Call me next time.
No, but seat adjust. So that was discussed quite a bit. Right. Is it or isn't it? Can you? Because it's like, particularly with our cars, it's like, well, I drive my Aston Martin. No one else really drives my car. So I'm going to set my seat, and why do I need to adjust it? It's not like a family car where mum and dad are jumping in and out of the car. Right. But even that, in the end, we were like, actually, what we found is that people had 2 seating positions. So if I'm driving quickly or I'm relaxed, particularly because of the GT nature of our cars, they'd actually have 2 programs. So 1 and 2, like for slightly more reclined or whatever. So we left it. But it was one of those things that got argued about. But we're trying to find a better balance of tactility
Because you can stick everything in the screen if you wanted to.
Right.
Absolutely, almost everything.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a few buttons.
Yeah,
that you
hazard
can't,
button, stuff like that.
But no, I think and I think for those listening, this is the argument against Tesla. A lot of Tesla's led the way in the controls, where if you want to adjust the seat or the mirrors, it's because they've made everything so minimalist. If you look onto like at 9, 3 o'clock on the steering wheel, these little buttons in the Model 3, but you have to go to the menu, you have to find the seat, and then you can adjust the seat that way, or your mirrors, or the tilt, or just the position of the steering wheel.
And I think now you can on the S, I think you can, or one of them, you can do the transmission. You can change gears.
Oh yeah,
on
right
the
on the
screen,
side.
which
Yeah,
is
so
wild.
it's a little.
I think there's a
too much.
redundant physical lever, but it's like, because it does. I think it's the Model S now. It does predictive gear engagements. In other words, like every day you leave your house and you go this way, so it's like you go in reverse at 8 o'clock every morning. Like do you want to go in reverse? Yes or no?
Right.
And it's like it's kind of weird.
So we're getting to the end here. I just want to ask, because this we haven't said it even once. This is the InEVitable podcast about electric cars. We've touched on it.
That's his huge innovation.
I know, it's great. You'll love it. It's an audio feature. It's analog.
Okay. I was going to say. I was going to point that bit out.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I could probably get something that says "dork" real loud.
What can we expect near term, like from Aston in this space? I mean, I guess this is a terrible way to ask it. The thing that you mentioned about experiences, and interiors to that effect. All EVs, they're fast, right? They're quick.
Oh, not all.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is they've sort of commoditized a lot of certainly the straight ahead performance. There's some handling pieces that need to be figured out because EVs are really heavy. So the handling piece is Lucid does a good job with all the motors and the complicated software, but generally speaking, performance EVs are fast. They're quiet. What else? Like as you design,
What's the first Aston going to be? Electric Aston.
How do you sort of think about that space and deliver a unique experience when a lot of the things are, again, the same?
I probably can't say a huge amount here. It's very difficult. There's a huge amount of effort going into it. It's something being analyzed, developed constantly. It feels a bit, in a way, like some of the notion of Valkyrie in terms of the effort being put into it, because we're having to rethink the experience. But I think as lots of things we discussed, when you have that input to change, you start thinking about what you've done in the past in a completely different way, and it brings new ideas to the table. So I can't. There's lots of places I can't go with this conversation, but basically the thinking and the way the team are attacking certain problems.
I'm sure Street Kev's fallen asleep at this point.
Oh yeah,
he's not going to hear this part. Yeah.
Sorry, Kev.
He's a PR guy.
Yeah. But yeah, there's lots of thinking going into engagement, shall I say?
Okay.
If I can make a suggestion, I just drove the Pininfarina Battista. So the way to make an EV engaging is 1,900 horsepower. Just so you're aware.
What I would say is it's been a very interesting journey doing EVs with Aston Martin, because I saw EVs in a certain way. The interesting thing for us is obviously we spent quite a bit of track time with EVs and our cars, and actually we learned a lot about our cars that were there and we didn't realize.
Oh, interesting.
Because the minute sound goes, you are like, okay, I use sound for this, but I'm doing, and yeah.
I don't want to be disrespectful, but I'm just trying to answer.
You do.
No, I want to ask this in a provocative way, right? And this is my last question on the topic. Porsche launched the Taycan, and I think they were very successful in that they delivered a vehicle that they can claim is Porsche first, EV second, because it has a signature sort of, feel, smell.
Well, remember, Porsche can also claim anything, and their rabid Porsche fans agree with it before actually experiencing it. So.
Present company included. We do a lot of Porsche sort of.
No, hey, 911's great. Taycan.
But Aside from the visual, and I love the way Astons look. I loved, and I think you've done a great job in pulling the heritage all the way through from from the original, like the DB5, James Bond cars, all the way, the grille, everything. But what's the signature experience, to use your word?
Well, so I read a lot about how all EVs are going to drive the same and be the same. I'll look at you two. So how many 4-cylinder, 2-liter cars have you driven, and how different were they?
Radically.
Right.
Yeah. And if I can put my hand up for a second, I've driven now probably, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 dozen EVs. Boy, are they different from each other. Like Nissan Leaf to a Model S to a Rivian to a Pininfarina Battista, like couldn't be more different.
So all I would say is the same things that make a driver engage with our cars, how a front end feels when you turn it in, how the rear end of the car reacts, all those things, none of those things are actually going to go away. The delivery of power is different. The amount of power is different. But some of those very, very balanced, essential things, they are going to be, well, I'm going to say they are going to be the same. And that's what our engineers and all our integration guys and our dynamics guys, that's what they're working on. That feel you have when you turn a car in. Because, that's why I take the example, because people come along, they go, oh, it just means that all cars are the same. But it's like, yeah, there are, I don't know how many 4-cylinder, 2-liter cars out there.
Right.
Countless.
And the feel between them, the power, they've still got, the fuel is the same. And then the engine is apparently the same, but actually the delivery of the experience is utterly, utterly different. It's going to be the same with EV, and it's going to be the same with us. Our engineers know how to tune steering very, very well. Actually, if you go and look at the steering rack, it's related to the steering rack in a lot of other cars. It's their ability to know what to do with the technology, whatever's put in front of them.
I have a last question. I think we've crossed the 2-hour point.
Yes. Well, I would just say I would look forward to the signature, whatever this Aston's sort of future signature is, because I think I agree. All these vehicles, all the 4 cylinders, it's a good analogy. They're all different, but I need to drive more Astons because I want to know what.
I see where he's going with this.
Yeah.
I want to know what that.
I also need to drive more.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I just want you to understand. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we know who to call.
Your last question.
All right. Miles, because it's inevitable that one of your cars, many of your cars, all of your cars will wind up on the lawn at Pebble Beach and Ville d'Est. What's the first car you designed, do you think, will be on a concours lawn?
Oh, I'd love to say it's 177, but yeah, 177 Valkyrie.
It has to be 177. It's older
But
and
if
there's
I'm-
fewer.
I don't know. I just want to know what your baby is.
Valkyrie was amazing, but 177 was my first. So
I would say, okay. Well, out of all, I mean, Valkyrie's just. I still can't even wrap my head around. But did you? What was your involvement in Vulcan?
it was
Yeah.
that
Because
one.
to me, Vulcan, like when I close my eyes and think of like again, the Valkyrie just being a spaceship that's like just like Vulcan to me is like the most evil, sinister, like like the British baddie
Yeah.
thing. That's the bad guy car, and that's the one for me where I'm just like that is just.
But that car, the actual all the image boards, I can't remember what the phrase was. It
Mood
was
board,
basically all
right.
the mood boards
Yeah.
for it. They were basically like without evil you can't have good.
Yes.
That was
Yeah.
the car. So it was
that-
supposed to be just the most evil Aston Martin and almost un-Aston Martin in what it did. That was sort of the premise of the car at the time.
Because for me, that's the car that's got away because Andy Palmer promised me, because I'd never driven 177, I've never driven Vulcan, and he was always like, as soon as we get our factory in Wales going, I'm hauling you out, and you're going to drive both, and then...
Now you see the real reason you're here. This is
no,
Johnny's
I-
angling for a
Right,
ride.
yeah.
Oh, no, I know lots of people at Aston I can
So
I can
Kev, if
bother.
we can
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
out a Vulcan, and
Yeah,
whole
Vulcan
bunch
to
of
177,
Yeah.
nice little drive in Wales somewhere.
Well, listen, this was a fantastic conversation. There's plenty
Yeah.
more we could have asked you about. We just
Yeah.
ran out of time, but
I could do another 3 hours on Valkyrie right now if you're game. So,
But thank you so much.
thank you guys.
yeah.
was good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miles.